Welcome to the Not in the Job Description podcast. I'm Scott McLaughlin.
And I'm Chris Kiernan.
No matter what type of job you've had, there were situations that happened to you during work that you couldn't wait to tell your friends about.
We interview a variety of guests about some of their crazy stories from work, from entry-level food service industry jobs to doctors and attorneys. We will explore funny, gross, embarrassing, scary, and sometimes almost unbelievable stories that people have experienced while on the job.
Keep in mind that our guests or the companies they work for may be masked in order to protect the innocent, or maybe even the guilty. On today's episode, we talk to Mark, who works with drug-sniffing dogs. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
How's it going, Mark?
Good. How about you guys?
Good.
So, we've had a lot of strange jobs on, and I have to tell you, I've known you for quite a few years, and I knew this is what you did, but I have to ask, how did you get into this? What jobs led you into this type of business?
So I actually got our dog about 6 years ago, 5.5, 6 years ago. We were looking for a more of a home protection dog because our lab, who we got when I first deployed in 2009 for her big bark to protect the wife and kid type thing, she's getting old, so we knew it was time to find something different. So, we looked around and we ended up getting a Belgian Malinois, which people confuse with a shepherd.
Right.
She gets very, very upset when people call her a shepherd. She gets angry and barks. So we ended up getting her, and I had a buddy of mine who I met through the real estate business. He trains canines for police departments. And we were talking. I was like, hey, come over, check out this dog. I want to know what kind of drive she's got, what I can do. Because I was actually thinking more of explosives. Get her to be a bomb dog. I was being selfish. I can get into OSU games,
right?
Free jacket games, things like that. Well, he brought up that private narcotics detection for residents. You think your kids are doing drugs, you're not sure where to find them, you bring in a dog.
Yeah.
He said he did it one time as a friend and charged them like $50 to bring the dog in. And he found stuff. Well, as he's walking out, all the neighbors came over and were like, hey, our kids hang out with him. Would you mind checking our house? He's like, so $1,500 later for 2 hours. Wow. He walked out of a neighborhood.
And he made one kid the most unpopular kid in the neighborhood.
I'm pretty sure he may never been found. So that's how I kind of got into it. I have 2 boys of my own. My oldest actually just turned 15 3 days ago. I have an 11-year-old. They're both in sports. And even if I didn't make money, I know now my kids were never going to be able to bring it in. Their friends are never going to bring it in.
Right.
It was the height of the vape issue, so I figured I would try that. So went to the vape store along with my canine guys who were doing the nut drugs, bought liquid vape. All it is liquid nicotine until it's flavored.
Right.
So figured I'd try to get into schools. Well, Old Tandy kind of screwed me on that. When I got her finally certified in it, they went and spent $35,000 on vape detectors.
Oh, gosh.
Which basically looks like smoke detector.
Yeah.
But they put them in all their bathrooms through the schools. And it sends an alert to the administration of where it's coming from. It also picks up, I guess, fights or whatever. So Old Tangy kind of screwed me on that one. But it worked out in my benefit because I now go to Pittsburgh twice a month. And I go to Erie, Pennsylvania once a month. And I hit rehab centers and I hit jails in Pittsburgh.
Oh, wow.
And the 2 jail places that I go to in Pittsburgh, they can't have any nicotine whatsoever.
Oh, wow.
So it's more of a halfway house for them.
Okay.
But they can't have anything. So when we first went in there, we were getting it out of the ceilings. We were getting it out of everywhere. So I was one of the most unpopular people in Allegheny County for a while.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm still am.
So you train this dog, and then is there a network of private dog owners, and you kind of network with them to get these jobs in other cities, or how did people know to call Mark to have his dog come and look for nicotine?
So I actually responded to a Facebook post of a Malinois group that I'm in, and it was somebody asking about if they'd ever had a dog trained for vape. I reached out to her. She was actually the administrative officer for a company in Florida. They were looking for someone to go down to Florida to do schools while working the negotiated the contract. COVID hit, that contract fell through,
Sure.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
But we ended up, I was the closest handler they had to Pittsburgh. And so that's how I got these jobs about a year and a half ago.
Nice.
Now you mentioned the type of dog, and I mean, I love dogs. I have one. You could argue maybe even two dogs because my daughter dragged her dog into our house, and it's not really even a dog. So there's really an argument there. But I have two dogs, and I like to watch a lot of shows about dogs, and they say if you want to get a dog to either be a cadaver dog or a drug dog, it's not necessarily the breed, but it is the enthusiasm. Has that been your experience as well?
Oh, very much so. I mean, if the dog has the drive, you can train a dog to do anything. Most military and police dogs are either shepherds or they're the Belgian Malinois. You're going to find a lot of your bomb dogs are labs.
Oh, okay.
Because they are so gentle
Yeah.
and relaxed. I mean, you really don't want a Tasmanian devil when you find a bomb,
Right.
because, you're all going to run. But I mean, it all depends on the drive of them. My dog is very, very ball driven. Like, she'll do anything to get her ball, any reward. And she loves to work. I can tell if it's been a few weeks before I've gone and done a job, she gets cranky.
Oh, that's funny. So do you do things, if you don't have an actual job, do you do things, or do you have anything that you can use that you can just keep her, I guess, trained and
Kind of fill that void.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of companies out there. There's, what's the one I buy it from? There's Ray Allen. They do a lot of more like vests and leashes and things like that. And then there's Canine Elite, who sell narcotic scents. They sell, this one's going to freak people out, bed bugs.
Oh, yeah.
Because that is another job that you can get a dog to do.
Absolutely.
They sell mold. You can get the dog to.
Yeah.
So that was going to be my fallback. I was going to train it to do mold so I can get in with like home inspectors.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
the real estate. But so they sell all these. You can get anything you want. I just bought the fentanyl scent about a month and a half ago, which is it's an opioid. So she picked it up really quick because of the heroin and everything that she's trained on.
That's crazy. So I assume you'd have to train dogs to do all kinds of things. And I remember you and I spoke about this. There was a time frame, I don't know, 4 years ago, when bed bugs was like the biggest story out there. It was almost brought to you by Big Bed Bug, because every business had this problem, and it was bed bugs. And even the company I worked for at the time, we had bed bugs, and we found out that somebody had brought them in, which is pretty common in how they travel around. If your house has them infested and you have a blanket you travel with, guess what? You're bringing that blanket to work, and next thing you know, that those things are going elsewhere. And we did actually hire somebody to come in on Sundays when nobody was there and go through the floor and see if we could spot bed bugs. Now, what I thought was interesting about our experience with that, the employees on the floor saw no less than 1 million bed bugs. Those dogs never picked anything up, and we never really found that many. But still, bed bugs are very small, and unless they start to reproduce, you're in a much better place. But I just couldn't believe those dogs. They could pick up bed bugs, and the guy we talked to there said he was so busy. He was just going business to business to business, mostly at night, not to freak people out.
So there's, and if, you're talking about my former place of employment where you worked, yeah, people brought blankets in all the time to keep themselves warm. And yeah, there's a company out of Newark that actually does the bed bugs for the dogs. And they will actually go to like Goodwills for the donations aspects of it to make sure that there's nothing being brought in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, they're a big business.
So do you only work with just your dog, or do you also help train other dogs, or kind of how does that work? Or are you just you're just dedicated to your guy and that's it?
So I just work with my dog. But there's a group of us that work. There's, like I said, my trainer does law enforcement canines. So I get to see different officers from Whitehall, Dublin, Shawnee Hills. Those are the guys that I usually run with, and when we do our trainings, and we try to do that once every couple of weeks just to keep fresh, because they have to train more often than I do.
So when you have your dog kind of trained and you're out on this job, say for the vape products, but your dog is cross-trained, right? So he can also pick up some other scents while you're looking for vape. Maybe have you ever accidentally come across opioids, and then the person's like, "Oh, no, wait, I thought you're only looking for vape products."
No, so they know what I can search for. She is trained on heroin, crack cocaine, marijuana, meth, fentanyl, vape, and anything that makes up anything of those components.
Okay.
If somebody had Sudafed, she's going to pick up on it because that's what obviously meth is made with. But yeah, we found what we believe was 5 or 6 little baggies of meth in one of my places in Pittsburgh. And the lady said, "No, that's hair dye." So we're looking at her, and they're essentially in poop bags, like dog poop bags that you would carry around.
That's where I put my
But
hair dye.
they were tied in the corner like little balls. I mean, just like you would see on cops.
Right.
And I mean, as soon as we saw them, and there was like, she had a bunch of cigarettes in her shoes and 5 or 6 of these little baggies inside of her pillowcase. And I mean, they called the Pittsburgh Police Department. The cop's looking at me. He's like, "Well, let me see your dog run one more time." I'm like, "Okay." So we put it in a different room. She hit on it again, and he's like, "Good enough for me." So she was on her way back to jail. So
Yeah.
she was not happy with me.
Well, you mentioned schools, and I know you mentioned a school locally here. Have you tried to get is there any appetite for other schools in the area that might be interested in this service?
So I think they're very apprehensive of me coming in. One, I have the big ferocious looking dog
Right.
that everybody thinks is going to bite their face off. But if you actually saw my dog right now, she's probably sleeping in her bed in front of the TV. at
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
If not, she's on the couch. And yeah, I mean, she is trained to protect, but I have to give her a word that will do it. But I've tried, I've reached out to other schools. Some just don't get back to me.
Sure.
Cause I can even I don't even have to go, I don't have to be that close to somebody. I can just go around and get their backpacks.
Yeah.
If it's in there or if it's been near them. I mean, her nose is so good. Like, the rule of thumb is she can pick up a tablespoon in an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's how good their nose are. It's like they have 30 million scent receptors in their nose,
Right.
as opposed to us, we have like 4.
Do you get any false positives because there were drugs there, but the drugs have since been ingested?
We will. And that's the good thing about where we are in our rehab centers and things like that is she may hit and we may not find any drugs at the time, but we'll find paraphernalia all the time. Like, we'll find the vape pens, we'll find rolling papers, lighters, batteries, and things that they use to make their makeshift jail lighters.
Yeah.
We find those all the time.
You know, to your point of how receptive the smell of dogs are. I was watching a Nat Geo special one time, and it was about, dogs and their special jobs. And I'll never forget this because they took this, it was this big long-eared hound, and they were showing it in the back of this car, and the guy's like, "Yeah, we're doing this training study." And so they had somebody load a 9mm, and so they were touching the shell, and they fired off one shot, and the shell ejected, and then they took off running, and they gave the person 6 minutes. So the animal shows up with the handler, and he points to the shell. The dog sniffs the shell and then takes off. And they made a point to try to throw the dog off about 4 different times, like literally dropping hot dogs in front of it from a vendor, having other dogs run around. And this thing took about 25 minutes, and it tracked this person all the way to a beach sitting. I mean, it was the person who shot the gun. And they said, "You don't understand. I mean, these dogs, when they get a whiff of something, they can just carry that one molecule for miles." And that's what this thing did. I was always amazed at that.
It's amazing watching them work. I mean, like I said, I work with the law enforcement guys a lot, and they do not only practice their tracks for people, but they also do them for like lost objects. So if they're chasing a suspect and he tosses something,
Right.
they can go and find it. And watching these dogs track, I mean, we've all seen cops, we've all seen the live PD, and you're like, that's not how it works. But those dogs, they don't give up, and they just keep going until they find it. And that's why most of the cops have mouths, is because they just don't give up.
Right.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm not sure if Chris or Luke's aware of this story, but you and your ilk caused me some grief in high school.
Really?
Yeah. Not that I did drugs, never did drugs, never had anything to do with drugs, but I was a prankster. And I don't know, Chris, did they ever do drug searches at your school?
I think they did from time to time,
Yeah.
for sure. We were kind of in the hood, as they say.
Yeah, and so they would do these searches, and it wasn't like there must have been some rules around it. Like, so they would tell us, "Okay, everybody, extended homeroom on Friday because we're having the dogs roam through there. We're doing a drug search." So of course, anybody who did have drugs just knew not to bring them in on Friday. But they felt like they had to give. There might have been some legal reason they had to give some kind of notice. So I found this out, and I have a friend named Stefan. And Stefan is the nicest guy in the world. Didn't do any drugs. But we all shared this community locker. So I thought, oh, drug day, I'm going to have fun. Stefan's locker was right next to mine, and he rarely used it. But we all used this community locker. But I saw him open up his locker so many times, I knew his combination. So I went home Thursday night, and I shaved off some aspirin. I got some oregano and put it in bags. I had a syringe because my sister had horrible allergies. So I took a syringe and I filled it up with Benadryl. And I put all this stuff in a baggie. And when he left to go to homeroom, I stuck that baggie up in there and shut his locker. And I just thought, this is going to be great, thinking that if they open it up, he's going to be done. Well, homeroom wasn't lengthened the next day. You know, it was just the normal homeroom. So I thought, oh, they must have canceled it and didn't say anything about it. So we go to first period. And then I go to second period. I just forget about it. Second period, by the end, there's a knock at the door. I take that back. There was one extra step in here. When I found out that, you know, they didn't do it, I went to the locker and put it back in my locker to, you know, live to fight another day. Well, at second period, they came and get me. It was Miss Van Horn, who was the head of our disciplinary staff at the time. And she has this guy wearing a suit and a cop who's in uniform. And I literally thought, oh my God, something's happened to my family. And then they said, can you step out here? I said, yeah. Take me to your locker. And then it hit me like, oh my God, somebody saw me move this and they think that I have drugs. And that's exactly what happened. Some little narc was walking down the hallway and they're like, this guy's got drugs. So I'm like, guys, this is a huge mistake. They're like, just open the locker. You know, they were very much just the facts, ma'am.
It's not my pants.
Yeah, right. So I open the locker and I go to reach up into that thing to get the bag, and the uniform cop slammed me against the locker, put my arm behind my back, and I said, guys, this is a joke. It's a prank. I had it in my friend's locker. Now it's in mine. Now, you know, I think they would have believed all that if it weren't for the syringe, which looks like hardcore drug use. So we go back to Miss Van Horn's office, and I explain the whole thing. They pull the stuff out. They clearly see it's oregano. They see that it's just aspirin. It was pretty clear to see that after they pulled it out. And so the cops almost look pissed for wasting their time. Miss Van Horn says, hey, Scott, I have to understand, like, where'd you get the syringe? So I explained, it's my sister, you know, she has allergies. And she goes, well, I'm going to have to call your mom to validate this information. And I thought, oh my God, my mom's going to spaz out. She's only going to hear drugs and then everything else lost in the conversation. And that's exactly what happened. And Miss Van Horn is like, no, we're not saying that he has drugs. He had a syringe. My mom's like, what? He did what? So it was very much a funny incident. But what was funny is after everything got cleared up, the greatest conversation I ever had with Miss Van Horn, she leaned back in her seat and she goes, I probably shouldn't tell you this. And I said, what's that? She goes, that would have been funny as hell if he would have been in that locker. And the funniest part of the story, just in the past like 4 months, I ran into my friend Stefan at an event for our high school. And I told him that. And he looked at me like, are you freaking kidding me? You were going to send me up the river? And I said, yeah, anything for a joke, man. So your guys foiled me by not being there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is amazing to me how smart these dogs are. And just dogs in general. I mean, now my daughter's dog is what we call not smart, but in a lot of the shows that I've watched, they talk about, you know, the intelligence of dogs, and you can tell the ones that are driven can be very, very intelligent. They did something about a Doberman Pinscher that was going out and making shapes in the backyard with their stuffed animals. Now, when I heard that, I thought, bullshit. There's no way this thing. And the woman is telling the story very, very clearly and very succinctly, and she doesn't seem like she's crazy. And then she said, well, and we wanted to make sure we could prove it. They switch on the camera in the backyard, and this dog is running around. It has like 60 different stuffed animals. It's making half moon shapes. And then it's going out and just shoving them all away. And then it's making absolute squares and doing circles. I mean, it freaked me out. But yeah, I think dogs sometimes have a little bit more in there that we're not aware of.
Well, you bring that up. It's very interesting. Like when my wife and I first got together, we rescued a Jack Russell from somebody who had to give it away. Well, for some reason, this dog would just lay on my wife's stomach and like never let her go. Well, 3 weeks later, we find out she's pregnant with our oldest son.
Oh, wow.
And we're like, well, son of a bitch, he knew.
Yeah.
And we're pretty sure he knew with the second one too. They just know that. And like he would not leave her alone the whole time she was pregnant and always wanted to be like right there with her, laid on the couch with her. It was just crazy.
Yeah, I've had a Jack Russell as well, and it would know when my wife was coming home. And it wasn't because, the garage door went up. I mean, she would come home at different times sometimes. She used to teach at a college nearby. And like she would end up, my dog would go running to the door, and it would be about 3 minutes later, the garage door would go up. It was the weirdest thing. But she would do that no matter what time it was. If it was a weekend and it wasn't a regular time, that dog would just know when she was coming home, and that always freaked me out too.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Ironically, your dog used to get really excited when I was coming over as well. I don't really know what that meant, but I don't know.
It liked people it could own. That's why. So what kind of business is in the future for you?
We were actually trying to talk about that the other day because, like I said, my dog's getting 6. She'll be 6 in November, and she's, she gets more and more worn out after every search, and it takes her a couple days of, laying on the couch for a day and a half or so before she's back to normal. So we're thinking of probably getting another one. We might make this one a bomb dog, or we'll get 2 additional ones and make one a narcotics and a bomb dog, kind of see where it goes. And then it also depends on where we go in the next 6 years or so, because
Sure.
both boys will be out of high school in 6 years. So it kind of depends on where they are and where we decide to go retire.
Yeah, something that's kind of interesting. I think there has just been a change in the culture the past 5 years. You've got so many companies now. I'll tell you, the place that I work at, when I first joined them over a decade ago, they did not mess around. When you filled out that application, they asked me if I'd been arrested. I said, no. And the guy looked at me and said, never? I said, no, I haven't. Should I? Should I have been? You know something I don't know? And he goes, well, now's the time to put it on that paper if you have. And I said, okay, I'm pretty confident I'd remember that one. And he said, you have any existing warrants out there? And I said, no. And he said, I noticed you didn't put anything there for breaking the law. And I said, well, to the best of my knowledge, I haven't. He said, you've never got a speeding ticket? I said, well, yeah, I've had speeding tickets. How many? I don't know, several. But at the time, I'm 30-something years old. I'm like, I've had speeding tickets. Write them down. And I said, I can't remember them. Just, it's not going to happen. Well, then put down you have several. And then they took me to the nurse, where I went and did a P test where they practically, came around and watched me do it. And so they were very, very strict. And this was just a decade or so ago. Now you've got all these states, and many of them that we operate in, all these states, a lot of marijuana is even legalized for recreational use. And a lot of these places that, have business there, they're not even doing the drug testing anymore. Like, sure, you don't want, drugs on your place of employment, but most everybody is working in the house these days. So, I imagine that that's got to have an impact on this type of animal. Even if it's, at the police department, they probably can't have as much action as they would have in the past.
Yeah, it's actually, I've known several departments who are getting ready to revamp or get rid of their canines because of, we all know marijuana is going to be legal here shortly, whether it's a year or two here in Ohio. It's still illegal federally, which is where they get the conflict from, because they're waiting for the argument of, hey, it's legal in Ohio, but it's still illegal federally. That's what your dog hit on. Now you searched my car and you found illegal drugs.
Right.
So is it then a illegal illegal
Search and seizure.
because your dog hit on the marijuana? Well, did my dog hit on the marijuana, or did my dog hit on the other drugs you have? Or they have marijuana and they have a gun. Well, you hit on the marijuana and you found the gun, which is illegal.
Yeah.
What now? Why did your dog can't hit on a gun? Because it's not a bomb dog. Because you can't have a bomb dog. It's a narcotics dog.
Yeah.
At the same time, so a lot of like Colorado, when Colorado and Washington became legal, they basically started their whole canine programs from scratch again.
Yeah, you'd almost have to.
Yeah.
Because basically they're saying you were looking for one thing, although you found this other legal thing. That's not what you were searching for, right? I mean,
well, that, and they don't want to go to the court and say, well, marijuana is legal in Colorado.
Right.
Well, yes, but it's not federally legal.
Right.
So where's the conflict run there?
Right.
And, everybody I've talked to is just make it legal federally and just tax the shit out of it.
Yeah.
Which
Well,
is going to happen.
it is.
Eventually, I think that's
the
right.
dominoes have started falling on that.
Yeah, I always wonder about all these places, and I don't think it's legal anywhere in Ohio for recreational use, but there are places in Michigan, and we've got some surrounding areas that have recreational use. I always wonder, like, since they can't use federal banking, like everything they sell, they're getting cash essentially, and now are they worried about money laundering charges? Because technically, if they find a way to get that stuff into the money system, it is a federal law they're breaking.
Right. Well, and that actually was going to be one of my other ventures, was these people need to take their money from point A to point B.
Cash sniffing.
And what happens? Well, no, it was going to be, why not hire a bunch of ex-military vets that know how to do security?
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And I'll take your money from X, Y to Z for, a couple $100,000 of your cash that I'm taking.
Well, honestly, it's probably a need that they really have, because they're stuck. Their cost for security has to be insane, because there is no Brinks truck picking that stuff up. There's nowhere to take it to.
Right. So and I know a couple guys that have done security consultant for those type of businesses, and like their security alone, just at the dispensaries, are unreal.
I'm sure they are. They have to be.
Just drive down to Johnstown. You'll see the big manufacturing grow plant in Johnstown.
I didn't even know there was one.
Yes, off of is it Sportsman's?
Okay.
I mean, it's the only thing back there. It's back behind like the 31 and all that.
Okay.
It's like a 20, 30 acre
Wow.
grow building.
I had no idea.
Oh yeah.
I need to up my drug game.
You do.
Speaking of upping your drug game, when you have the dog out, it's sniffing around, just by the happenstance of the kind of people who are really into drugs, or even worse, they've gotten out of prison for drugs and now they're back into that life, you've got to have found some crazy shit.
We've found a few. A couple weeks ago, we were doing one of our routine searches at our rehab center. And I mean, this rehab center isn't for the homeless guy to walk into. I mean, you're talking insurance is paying for a good 30 to 90 day program for you. I mean, some of these people live better than I did in the military. That's how nice these places are. So we found it was a makeshift bong. They were using a Coke can, which we may have all seen those.
Yeah, I've heard of that before.
But she took, what was it? Oh, it was like the toenail clippers that have the little edge on it.
Okay.
That you can get underneath your nails.
Yeah.
She made a perfectly symmetrical hole, and she was using her vape pen to ignite it.
Okay.
But she was smoking tea leaves.
Tea leaves. All right.
I mean, she had 40 or 50 in her nightstand drawer of like tea bags. But it was like the ones that you put in like the hotel Keurigs or whatever, the little round things.
Yeah. Right.
So she was smoking those. And we're like, how does that get you high? Like, tell me, like, please, like, enlighten me how this works. And she like wouldn't say anything. Like, this, like, how do you,
That is
smoke tea leaves?
crazy.
Like, how do you smoke a tea leaf?
That is absolutely insane. I mean, if she thought she was getting something out of it, that's got to be, that should be the next thing they do for people to get out of rehab, you know, and get settled in. We're switching you from marijuana to Lipton. I mean,
There you go.
they think they're getting high, but it's not really addictive. That's the way to go, man.
It's a new methadone.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, we've found stuff in people's shoes, which is funny because like one of the jails that I go to in Pittsburgh, these guys have more Air Jordans
Yeah.
that could probably pay for my truck.
Right.
And I'm like, you're in here for like the next 2 or 3 years because they're working off their sentence.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you have 85 pairs of Jordans. How do you have 85 pairs of Jordans? But 30 of them have something in them.
Oh, yeah.
And because they take out the insoles and they'll cut them, put whatever's in the shoe, and then put the insole back in the shoe.
Yeah, I think the sadder part of that is when you confiscate the whole bit, the shoes are probably worth more than the weed.
Probably.
That's ingenious, though. People that are, you know, now, of course, she was smoking tea, but that's like the MacGyver of, of smoking something. And I always think it's funny when you find people who put so much effort into trying to do something wrong that if they took those smarts and just used them on something else, they would be in a much better position in life. You see it all the time.
Sure. Well, I mean, take your knowledge of how to get away with it and teach people how to find it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, who was what was the movie with Tom Hanks and DiCaprio?
Yep. Catch me if you
Yeah.
can.
So
Yeah, right.
that gentleman actually started working for check cashing companies and taught them how to catch counterfeit checks.
Right.
So you're saying Chris and I could get another kind of job where we teach steakhouses how to have people not steal sirloin tips?
Absolutely.
Done.
There it is. Yeah, I think we've, you know, I know that a lot of our friends, even from those days, will listen to our podcasts, and it's pretty funny. But yeah, we did our fair share of, no one's going to eat these. We might as well eat them.
But I mean, it's just crazy how ingenious some of these people are to hide whatever they are trying to hide. Like they're not. I mean, when they know we're coming in, like when they see us, they're like, "Shit, they're back.
Right.
I'm gonna lose everything." I mean, when I first started doing it, we had everybody line up in one of the rooms in the hallway, and then we were taking them to the day room.
Yeah.
And they were just gonna walk by the dog. It's all they were gonna do. Dog really wasn't even gonna search them, but they were just going to walk by, see if she could catch a whiff of something. Dude went to the bathroom from the back of the line. They followed him in. He had a bag. It's a gallon-size Ziploc bag size, but it was of loose, not leaf tobacco, but the ground-up tobacco that you would actually see in a cigarette
Okay.
in his pants. So it was in his crotch, and he's walking around with this, thinking, hey, they're going to search my locker.
Yeah.
Well, now you just waddled to the bathroom
Right.
like you were going to take a dump. And this thing, I'm like, how do you walk around with that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing when people like things, they'll do a lot of things to do them. But I did have another question. I know that there are certain types of drugs, and I don't know if they're considered bath salts or just different drugs that I understand you can even get at gas stations, and they're very hard to outlaw because as soon as you say we want to outlaw this, you have to put in what the chemical compound is that you're outlawing. And then those manufacturers of these little gas station types of drugs just change the elements in the compound. And now they'd have to write a different law every 2 weeks. And, you know, the legal system doesn't work that quickly. But do your dogs or your dog, is she able to find like anything? I mean, or do those things all have a very similar compound trait that she'll pick it up?
Usually it's got some type of compound trait. And you're actually talking about what's called Delta 8,
Okay.
which is, I don't know if you can get them here in Ohio, but like you can get them in Pennsylvania, you can get them in Michigan. It's basically like a weed.
I really need to up my drug game. Thanks for letting me know that.
You're welcome. And, just follow me around one day. And but as long as it has a component that she can smell in, she'll pick it up. Like we ran into, it's what's called kratom. It's a legal powder, but it's got an opioid base to it. And that's how she found it.
Oh,
It
wow.
was in like a Dixie cup, inside of a Dixie cup, inside of a Dixie cup, inside clothes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then when you're training your dog, like how long is the training, right? Like she obviously, it's not like a 1 month kind of thing, right? Does it take years, or maybe it is only just a few months?
So she actually picked it up really quick. I think it took her about a week or two to get very, very comfortable of finding marijuana. That was what we started her on. It's the easiest thing to do. And then overall, it took me about 9 months to get her to where I could pass the certification for the state.
Okay.
And the certification that I do is actually the same or higher than what the police departments use. So I pass an OPATA certification test,
Okay.
but I'm not OPATA certified.
Okay.
So I can't, which I would love to, be on call for any cops in the area where I live
Right.
to go and be able to do that if they had traffic stops near me.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you this, and I probably should have asked you earlier. You're welcome to say the name of your business if you would like. If you don't, because you don't want to know that people are associated with Chris and Scott, I understand that.
My business is Gernert Canine Services. We're out of Sunbury. I go anywhere and everywhere. I've been to Indiana. Like I said, I go to Pittsburgh, go to Erie, Pennsylvania. So if it's within a 6-hour round trip, I'll go.
So 6-hour round trip of Central Ohio. Great. So if you want to make your kid the least popular kid in the neighborhood, call Mark.
If he's good, you want to be 6.5 hours away.
That's right. Well, as we round out the episode, this is when I ask Chris, what have we learned today?
Well, I learned that no matter how hard you try, that dog is probably going to find what you're hiding.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think what I learned today was don't hide your drugs and things that are valuable, because what's the point of having 2 things that are valuable taken away? Right? That's pretty important stuff. Well, thank you very much, Mark, for talking with us today. I'm Scott McLaughlin.
I'm Chris Kiernan.
Saying we'll see you at work.
Thank you for listening to the Not in the Job Description podcast. If you have a story you'd like to share, or if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, please let us know by sending us an email with a brief description of your story to stories@notinthejob.com.